Hitoyoshi is a lonely boy who suddenly receives an unexpected visit from a maid at his house. With a cute demeanor and a unique request to be hired, she reveals herself as a clumsy ex-hit woman. Living his normal student life, one day, Hitoyoshi Yokoya receives a visit from a maid who claims to be an assassin looking to be hired. As she walks toward the Yokoya residence, the woman's tiara jingles with every step, making noise wherever she goes. Meanwhile, the boy in his terribly messy room sleeps like a rock. When the doorbell rings, Hitoyoshi sluggishly drags himself downstairs and checks the entry camera to see who's at the door. Outside, a beautiful woman apologizes for the intrusion but expresses her desire to be hired as the house's maid. He invites her in immediately, apologizing for the mess and explains that his parents are away. As he grabs something to drink from the kitchen, he starts to realize that he let a complete stranger into his home without thinking, so he tries to stay polite while eyeing her suspiciously. In his mind, she might be trying to sell something or propose something illegal, so his best bet is to stall until he can figure out how to send her away. He asks if she's worked as a maid before, to which she replies that she has, but her previous jobs were a bit different. They involved executing traitors who had betrayed her former employer. In fact, she's here because of a recommendation from that very employer. Hitoyoshi thinks the woman must be joking, but part of him is sure she isn't, and fear starts to creep over him. At this point, getting the stranger out of the house isn't just a matter of politeness, it's a necessity. He then asks if she has any connection to his family, since she came on recommendation. The maid explains that Hitoyoshi is the grandson of the woman who once lived in the house of the second son of the cousin of the wife of the heir to her employer. Instinctively, Hitoyoshi blurts out that he's practically a stranger to this employer but quickly tries to correct his posture so as not to offend her. Trying to shift the conversation, he asks what kind of executions she specializes in. To demonstrate, she takes the young man outside and uses a tree as a target, throwing sharp metal projectiles at the trunk. Realizing she's not messing around, he makes it clear that he doesn't want her to kill anyone, and that he doesn't even know this employer she mentioned, so he won't be hiring her. She understands, apologizes for taking up his time, and leaves without causing further trouble. Hitoyoshi wonders if it was all just a dream, but soon notices something left behind in the grass. Meanwhile, on the other side of the story, the maid had already guessed the outcome would be no different, but her biggest problem now is figuring out where to go next. As she waits for the subway, she continues on her way, but soon Hitoyoshi appears, running in the background, holding a bell in his hand. It's the bell from her tiara that had been left behind at his house. Distracted, Hitoyoshi runs to return the item but doesn't see the truck speeding across the road. In a flash of instinct, the maid pulls the boy out of the vehicle's path, saving his life. The driver curses the boy for his carelessness and drives off while the girl admits she's never saved anyone's life like that before, and her heart is pounding. A confused Hitoyoshi hands her the bell, and they say their goodbyes, each going their separate ways. Or at least that was the plan. The boy suddenly changes his mind, saying he was actually looking for a maid and that she can work in his house after all. Without delay, she returns to the Yokoya residence and lays out an assortment of blades on the living room table, explaining that knives were likely the first tools used by humans, and though simple, can take a person's life when wielded correctly. Hitoyoshi interrupts the free lesson, explaining that he needs help with cleaning, not with that. The maid, thinking this is some kind of code for killing someone, asks who needs to be cleaned up. He points to the bags of trash in the room, hoping that's self-explanatory, but she interprets it as someone being inside one of those bags. Exasperated, Hitoyoshi makes it clear that he needs a real maid, someone to sweep and mop the floors. With that, the maid asks if she'll be hired if she does that job. Once that's settled, however, it becomes clear that she has absolutely zero skill when it comes to using a bucket and mop, an utter disaster. At the very least, she manages to recover her balance when she slips in the water she spilled, but not before the bucket she threw into the air lands squarely on her head. Faced with this catastrophe, she wonders how she could possibly be hired after such poor work. Hitoyoshi removes the bucket from her head and takes the blame for asking her to do something she wasn't used to. Considering that, he offers to help her clean the house together. By late afternoon, the cleaning is a complete success, with everything in its rightful place. After hearing the young man's thanks, the maid seems awkward, as if she's not used to receiving that kind of appreciation. Hitoyoshi realizes it's getting late and that neither of them has had lunch, having been so focused on cleaning. He asks if the maid knows how to cook, but she responds with silence. So he reassures her that he's got the perfect meal for today and suggests she take a bath while she waits. In the bathtub, she finds herself thinking about the young man thanking her for her work. Meanwhile, in the living room, Hitoyoshi reflects that he should be enjoying his summer vacation with his parents away, but instead he's ended up with an assassin maid who can't clean or cook. But that's not the only thing on his mind. If she decides to come out of the bathroom wrapped in just a towel, he has no idea how he's going to handle that, so he mentally prepares himself for the possibility. But before he can gather his thoughts, the woman walks out of the bathroom fully dressed, shattering the guy's illusion. She then sets herself to chopping cabbage for dinner because if there's one thing she knows how to do, it's chop. Without delay, she tosses the vegetable in the air and shreds it into thousands of pieces, finishing the task without breaking a sweat. With that done, all that was left was to make some instant miso soup and serve it alongside the tonkatsu. Hearing this, the woman remarks that she's not quite sure what these dishes are, but it doesn't matter much to her. After all, her whole life she had only eaten to sustain herself, never caring about taste or appearance. Moved by this sad situation, Hitoyoshi assured her she'd be surprised by the tonkatsu because it was made by the Katsuya couple, who've been preparing the best food in the region for over 60 years, all at a very reasonable price. There were even rumors that famous people would disguise themselves just to buy from them. Despite the convincing pitch, the maid remained visibly unmoved, showing little excitement, which left him feeling a bit frustrated. But since that's how things were, he decided to show her firsthand what he was talking about. After splitting the tonkatsu between the two, he placed cabbage on their plates and served one to Ms. Maid, as he liked to call her. Taking advantage of the moment, he asked for her name, but she responded that she didn't have one since she'd only ever been called whatever her employers decided. So the boy could call her whatever he wanted. Not being great with names, Hitoyoshi decided to keep calling her Maid. She reflected that she had never cared about what others called her before, but now something felt different. Regardless, the moment to eat finally came, and Hitoyoshi eagerly waited for her to try the food and give some feedback. When she took a bite, the maid mused that, as always, nothing had changed. She couldn't tell whether the taste was good or bad. However, recalling a vague memory, she commented that the food was warm and pleasant. Inside, she reflected that the bath and the food were warm, just like the person standing before her. Hitoyoshi mentioned that the room where she'd be staying was at the end of the hallway on the second floor, and that the bed linens had been properly laid out, but if something wasn't right, she should just let him know. The woman was surprised to see that the boy had prepared the room for her, and it carried her back to an old memory where she stood holding a math sheet. A man in the background said she had passed the test, adding that her skin was as white as snow and her heart as cold as it. On that day, this man had told her what her name was, but now she preferred to say she had none, far better than being called Cold Woman. Hitoyoshi interrupted her reflection to pass the tonkatsu sauce, saying it just wasn't the same without it. Without hesitation, she poured it over her food and took a bite. The sensation was so delightful that even she couldn't contain her emotion and had to express her joy. Later, at 3 a.m. the next day, Hitoyoshi woke up drenched in sweat after a dream he hadn't had in ages. Hit by a sudden midnight hunger, he decided to look for some instant ramen. But as he descended the stairs, he heard a strange noise coming from the kitchen. Startled, he remembered the maid had said she was a professional killer. Still, he mustered the courage to check what was happening. Peeking into the kitchen, he saw the maid with a red stain on her face. At first, he thought it was blood, but when she turned around, he realized she was actually covered in tonkatsu sauce. Caught in the act, the woman apologized profusely, but relieved that it was nothing serious, the house owner didn't scold her. The maid explained that she thought if she were to die tomorrow, she at least liked to taste that flavor one more time. Not wanting to limit her experience to just the tonkatsu, Hitoyoshi whipped up an improvised fondue with the sauce since there wasn't much else to make it more fancy. Still, all the maid wanted was to eat everything with the sauce she had come to love, and that's exactly what she did. After the meal, she asked if Hitoyoshi had a nightmare, as she heard him moaning in his room. Fearing he might be a killer too, she had taken the liberty of entering his room and found him calling for his mother repeatedly. The maid had also had a dream where she was talking to the tonkatsu sauce. The sauce said it was endless, and no matter how much she licked, it would never run out. However, when she started eating, she woke up. At least her dream had been different this time since she usually dreamt of bad things. That's why she felt sorry for the boy having such a troubling nightmare. She knew all too well what that was like. Hitoyoshi shrugged it off, saying it was just a dream he had from time to time. In his mind, he replayed images from his childhood where he kept calling for his mother as she walked away. He explained that he could only sleep when lying in his mother's lap on nights when he had those nightmares. Hearing this, the maid found a way to comfort him and offered him her lap to rest on. Her mind wandered back to the man who always said she was born to kill, and that thought enveloped her soul in darkness. But when Hitoyoshi laid his head on her lap, the world around her became lighter. Both felt awkward with the situation, but neither of them backed out. They saw it through to the end. Reflecting on the changes in her life since she arrived at this house, the maid felt her body warming up and found it hard to breathe. It was as if her body was about to burst from the rapid flow of her blood. It had been a long time since she had felt this way, reminiscent of the excitement she felt when facing multiple enemies at once. But now the context was completely different. Her body moved without her command, and she couldn't understand why this had happened. Deep down, that was all she wanted to know. The next day, while tidying up the house, she was cutting a cardboard box into pieces to make more room in the trash bag. Hitoriyoshi noticed her technique and was impressed by the girl's efficiency. Later, he discovered that someone had left a strange animal at the entrance of his house with the words, "Please adopt me," written on the box. There was also a letter, which the maid read to the master. I bought him at the pet shop thinking he was a Pomeranian, but he turns out to be a breed that grows very large. He doesn't fit in my house, so I decided to leave him with a wealthy family. Please take good care of him. Hitoriyoshi complained about the selfishness of the person who had the nerve to do such a thing, but did not disregard the little animal. He decided to adopt it, as he knew no one else who could take it in, and abandoning it on the street would surely be its death. Regarding this, the maid took on a somber tone and responded that if determined to survive, this animal would endure, no matter who or what crossed its path. This was the so-called animal instinct. In other words, saving a life out of pity might be a recipe for disaster. And if this being was abandoned, it was because it had to be. A life that is unimportant to anyone. If not forced to be strong on its own, such weak beings are destined to die by the roadside. If Hitoriyoshi decides to save this life without proper consideration, the consequences of that choice will haunt the animal later to collect for it. After this grim speech, she questioned whether Hitoriyoshi was ready to take on this responsibility. The boy wasn't sure how to respond, but when the maid had saved his life the day before, he didn't think it was out of pity. When we see a life in distress before us, it is the human instinct that makes our bodies move before we think. Of that, Hitoriyoshi was certain. Hearing these words, the girl became pensive, having never heard of something called human instinct before. Hitoriyoshi added that he understands how those left behind feel, but this is his way of acting. With that aside, he thought it best to quickly take out the trash and go back inside. Upon entering, Hitoriyoshi quickly bonded with the little creature and offered for the maid to hold it, but she seemed uncomfortable with the idea and declined. Hitoriyoshi noticed she became distant after their earlier conversation, so he placed the animal nearby to see if it would cheer her up, but she chose to distance herself again. Hitoriyoshi wondered if she was afraid of dogs. Then she awkwardly confessed that she was just a little, but if it was an order, she could touch the animal. The master wanted to know where this fear came from, and the maid shared that as a child, the person she considered her mentor had conducted training where she was left on a mountain filled with wild, fierce dogs. Hitoriyoshi was sure that must have been traumatic, so he imagined it would be difficult to care for this animal given the woman's fear. This made the maid feel useless, so the young man hurried to explain that it wasn't that. He just didn't want to leave the little creature alone again. Maybe it would be good for the girl to learn to tolerate it a bit. After all, even if he found someone for the animal to stay with, he didn't want to see the creature pass from hand to hand. Thus, the maid gathered the courage and asked to hold the little one. Then, with great difficulty and trembling with fear, she faced her trauma and held the chubby, adorable puppy. Hitoriyoshi noticed that the little one was calm but wanted to know what part of him scared her the most. To this, she revealed that it was his fierce claws, wild fangs, and furious eyes. Honestly, Hideyoshi could only see a mochi when he looked at the dog, that sweet made from rice. Amidst this, the animal bit the maid's finger as if it were its mother's teeth, causing the woman to suddenly panic, although she managed to hold herself enough not to throw the little fellow into the air. After this grim challenge, the maid sat on the floor as if her life had narrowly escaped disaster. She apologized for disappointing the master, although Hitoriyoshi was quite confused by the maiden's exaggerated stance. After all, he figured the puppy's teeth were just coming in. Nothing more than that. That said, he'd like to take a trip to the vet to check on the health of the new family member. Upon arriving, he asked the maid to stop by the store next door and pick up some essentials like a chew bone, a food bowl, food, and a leash. By late afternoon, they were returning home and Hitoriyoshi thanked the maid for her help. In turn, she praised the kindness of the master, for in her life to date, she had never met someone like this boy. In the place where she had lived before, failure was not an option. Therefore, each time the boy was kind, she felt a great distance for him. Until then, she had simply done everything that was demanded, but the things the boy asked for were completely different from what she was used to. For that reason, she continued to feel unnecessary to the boy, as if the things she did now were simply insufficient. But of course, this did not mean that she had not felt unnecessary before, quite the opposite. In the world where she lived, everyone fought for the few places one could belong, much like in the game of musical chairs. Age and gender mattered little, as long as you had the necessary skills to get the job done. The problem was that everything she knew how to do seemed useless, making her feel even more out of place. Perhaps had she encountered that little dog the way Hitoyoshi did, with love, or if she had realized earlier that the world could be a warm place, she might have become what Hitoyoshi wished for her. That said, she needed to know if she could really stay at her new employer's house, since he might find her unnecessary in this unfamiliar world. Then, still puzzled, Hitoyoshi was about to reply when the dog tugged on the leash, dragging the boy to a corner. Only then did he turn to the lady and assume that all she wanted was to leave her old job and be a normal girl. She asked if this meant she should stop killing, and he replied that's what he understood from their entire conversation. With this, the maid entered an internal conflict, having never known a life outside of that, especially since, as people said, if she wanted to be useful, she had to practice these acts. Violence had always been the only path, but now it seemed another alternative was being laid out before her, exemplified when Hitoyoshi invited the woman to watch the sunset. Doing so, she reflected that if she could find a place where she belonged without having to kill people, she might understand more about life according to what Hitoyoshi described as warm and cozy. At that moment, Hitoyoshi confessed that he was scared when the maid arrived at his house, but soon saw that he shouldn't be, as being by her side, he realized the situation was quite different. Deep down, he thought she was a good girl. Hearing these words, the maid kept repeating the term, good girl, as if it were something from another world. At the same time, she was transported back to a very old memory, receiving affection in her early childhood. Thinking about this, she wondered what she should do to become a normal girl, and Hitoyoshi confessed that this was a very difficult question, noting that the lady worried too much about making mistakes all the time. Thus, a way to start being normal was to understand that making mistakes is part of life. In the evening, when she returned home, the maid chopped the cabbage in the most efficient and organized way possible, so she didn't have to focus mentally. Thus, she thought being normal was being efficient. Suddenly, the little dog came to nuzzle her leg. Then the girl, in panic, drew a knife on the poor thing who practically died on the spot, but the truth was that he was just hungry. When she realized this, the woman put out some dog food and resolved the situation. Having done so, she came to understand the animal's feelings and considered this to be normal. After that, she even tried to pet the dog, but Hitoyoshi arrived and left her feeling embarrassed. Hitoyoshi thanked her for feeding the new friend, and thinking he resembled a sweet rice cake, decided to name him Animakataro. The maid liked the name for being easy to understand and for having something sinister about that animal. The homeowner laughed at this conclusion and thanked the girl for cutting the cabbage, adding that she was becoming adept at being a maid. With that compliment, the girl was over the moon. More confident, she asked to take care of Animakataro, as even though the owner saw him as a cute and harmless little creature, she still viewed him as a wild and fierce dog, which would be part of her training to become someone normal. After all, she wanted to believe in the boy's words. Thus, Hitoyoshi made it clear, with all his words, that he believed in the maid, and these words ran through her mind as if they were the fuel necessary for a profound life transformation. So she promised that she would take care of everything necessary. She then petted the dog, picked him up, and wondered if this is what a mochi was, to which the boy explained with some concern that it was just a comparison, nothing more. Speaking of comparisons, the maid noted that Animakataro was small and warm, which reminded her of when Hitoyoshi said he was scared of her, but, after briefly living with her, discovered that the maid was a good girl. Thinking about this, she now felt silly for having been scared of such a little thing. Later, when the meal was ready, she ate the okonomiyaki and was delighted, especially with the katsuta sauce she loved. Therefore, she even asked for more food, and Hitoyoshi replied that wanting more of something we like is normal. Moreover, if the maid had any other wishes, she just had to ask. Regarding this, she wished that Hitoyoshi would give her a name. Unsure what to say, the boy looked for clues to a meaningful name, so he asked when her birthday was. The woman wasn't sure but remembered she was born during a historic snowstorm. Therefore, Hitoyoshi thought of Yuki, which means snow. Hearing this, the maid recalled how her former mentor had named her Stu, because it also meant snow. However, Hitoyoshi gave a new meaning of snow to the girl, saying it was beautiful, white, and warm because when snow falls on crops in winter, its warmth protects the sprouts, which emerge when spring arrives. At that moment, the girl wondered why she moved on her own to save Hitoyoshi and why she suddenly felt in such a warm world. Maybe it was because this boy made her heart beat so strongly, and if she stayed around, maybe one day she would discover the reason for all this. Thus, she thanked Hitoyoshi for being such a wonderful person and accepted being called Yuki. The next day, Hitoyoshi's younger sister Riko arrived at the boy's house. Just before this, Yuki was playing with Animakataro in the backyard when her boss called her over. He held back a bit, clearly embarrassed, making her wait to reveal his true reason for calling her. Finally, he showed her an ear-piercing device, explaining he'd really been wanting to get his ears pierced ever since a friend of his did it. The problem was he couldn't work up the courage to do it alone, so he hoped Yuki would help since she already wore earrings and must have experience with that sort of thing. So Yuki accepted the challenge and prepared to pierce the young man's ear. But in truth, she was sweating nervously, terrified she'd mess it up. She hesitated, then asked if this was some kind of initiation punishment for new employees. Thinking she might have done something wrong, she apologized, saying she just couldn't bring herself to do something as awful as putting a hole in Lord Hitoyoshi's body. Surprised, Hitoyoshi figured her job was exactly about putting holes in others, so he hadn't expected this task to be an issue. At that moment, Riko rang the doorbell, waiting eagerly to be greeted, having heard her brother had gotten a new puppy. Without delay, Yuki opened the door, and without even checking to see it wasn't her brother, she asked Hitoyoshi to show her the little dog, only to realize it was a woman standing there. Yuki then asked if the young lady was Lord Hitoyoshi's younger sister, leaving Riko momentarily speechless at the unexpected question. Soon Riko was invited in and became fascinated by how clean the living room was, immediately adoring the cute dog, but she was most captivated by the beauty of her brother's new maid. Irritated that her brother hadn't mentioned this earlier, she nearly pinched his cheeks off in revenge for keeping her in the dark, despite their regular messaging. Hitoyoshi explained he was worried their mother would find out and get anxious. Speaking of family matters, Riko asked what he told their father about all this, and he said he'd only requested to hire a new cleaner, nothing more. As usual, their father had agreed over the phone. Regarding this, Riko wasn't sure if their father trusted her brother or simply didn't have time to get involved in his life, but quickly dismissed that thought, remembering it wasn't the main issue here. As she was saying, Riko wasn't pleased at all about being left out of her brother's life updates. Intrigued, Yuki asked if the two lived in separate houses, and Riko confirmed, though her awe at the maid's beauty soon made her turn her face away in embarrassment. Hitoyoshi explained that his sister loved beautiful people, and that was exactly why he hadn't told her about Yuki. With that, Riko went back to squishing her brother in annoyance, accusing him of trying to monopolize the maid. Shortly afterward, the little sister took the chance to introduce herself properly as Hitoyoshi's younger sibling. Likewise, Yuki introduced herself, explaining that Lord Hitoyoshi had given her this name, which truly surprised his sister, as she hadn't thought her brother capable of such a thoughtful gesture. However, Riko paused, contemplating when the maid mentioned receiving a name from Hitoyoshi, prompting Yuki to explain she had been an assassin, and since she didn't have a specific name, she had asked the young man to give her one. Little Hitoyoshi had tried to prevent her from saying this, he was too late, and now his little sister knew the whole bombshell and began trembling. But it wasn't fear, it was excitement from hearing such a wonderful story. She even wanted an autograph from this strong, beautiful woman. So she pulled a notebook from her bag and asked the maid to sign her name. As Yuki did so, Riko observed her in admiration, thinking she looked like a painting in that chair. She then whispered to her brother that Yuki resembled a lady more than an assassin. With that, Yuki finished signing her name on the notebook, but something about the signature puzzled Riko and Hitoyoshi. Riko commented that her handwriting was strange, so Yuki explained she could speak around 12 languages from her travels for work, but had never learned calligraphy, apologizing if her signature looked messy. However, Riko responded it looked like a cute idol signature. Next, the little sister announced she had a fantastic idea. Her vacation project theme would be Yuki. But for this to happen, Yuki would need to show off her deadly skills. Hitoyoshi made it clear that his sister couldn't write anything bizarre, so she promised it would just be an observation diary about the new assassin maid, lovely to the point of death, and her special abilities. Hearing this, Hitoyoshi was at a loss, burying his face in his hands, while Yuki invited the little sister to follow her out to the garden. Once there, Yuki first placed an apple on Riko's head, did a backflip, and threw a dagger right into the fruit with pinpoint precision. Riko was thrilled by the display and jotted down her observations, curious about where Yuki had pulled the knife from. Yuki explained she had a pocket near her chest and kept 16 knives in her uniform, though she reduced it to 5 after Lord Hitoyoshi said it was too much. One stayed in her chest pocket while the rest were in her garter. Noticing Yuki lifting her skirt to explain this, Hitoyoshi requested she make things less illustrative. As they headed back indoors, Riko admired the little bell in Yuki's hair, but thought it might interfere with her work. Yuki explained that when her target heard the bell, the fatal strike had already been delivered. The little girl thought this was the coolest thing ever and made note of it in her journal as her stomach growled. Hitoyoshi burst out laughing at his sister's hunger pangs, and she defended herself, saying it was just simple hunger. Speaking of which, the young man asked if she wanted something to eat. Given it was lunchtime, Riko then asked what Yuki could cook. The maid herself wasn't sure if what she made would qualify as a dish, but since they insisted, she went off to the kitchen. After some time, Yuki was chopping cabbage in her usual way and explained to the little girl that this was the most efficient and uniform technique for doing so. To illustrate her point, the maid placed a plate of chopped cabbage on the table, leaving the little one awestruck once again with the impeccable cut. However, man does not live by cabbage alone, which is why the Yokoya siblings took the maid to a fast food chain to enjoy a hamburger and fries. Hitoriyoshi mentioned that the cabbage would be saved for dinner, while Riko noticed a poster announcing today as the day of the summer festival. Hitoriyoshi drew Yuki's attention to show her that at the event there was a senbei stall with the sauce she loved, which made the maid slightly drool with anticipation. For this reason, she was eager to attend the festival, and Hitoriyoshi was excited to take them both. In the late afternoon, they arrived at the event, and Riko's eyes sparkled with the beauty and fun of the place. Without delay, she pulled the two to the shooting game but missed her first shot. Now it was Yuki's turn, who positioned her gun methodically and intimidatingly, but also missed and admitted that shooting wasn't her forte. Later, at the goldfish scooping game, Yuki played with great efficiency and taught Riko that the secret was to erase her presence and quickly attack the target from behind. The stall owner commented that the little girl had a very kind big sister, and Riko confirmed that it was wonderful, causing a reaction in Yuki's head. Later, the trio went to a stall with the beloved katsuta sauce, and the maid was moved to tears by the chance to devour such delicious food. Motivated by the woman's happy expression while eating, the stall owner excitedly made another senbei with sauce on the house. Meanwhile, Riko ran off to get a drink, and since she couldn't call her sister back, Hitoriyoshi was afraid to leave the spot and risk losing sight of her, so he decided to sit and wait for her return. To pass the time, Hitoriyoshi made small talk with his maid, asking if she had ever been to a festival. Upon hearing this question, Yuki remembered that she had indeed stepped into one, but not exactly to celebrate, rather to carry out her duties. At that moment, fireworks exploded in the sky, entertaining the two until Riko returned with the drink. Then the three sat together to enjoy the scene. On the way back home, after buying more senbei to take with them, Riko read in her notebook that Yuki had already eaten 8, so it might be a good idea to stop for today. Hitoriyoshi then wondered who the older sister was now. Suddenly, a motorcyclist sped by after stealing a purse and nearly hit Riko, but Yuki saved her just in time. Hitoriyoshi checked if the girl was hurt, but she was enchanted because it was the first time someone other than her father had carried her like a little princess. Having said that, the boy turned to pick up the things that had fallen and declared that evil people like that motorcyclist should receive divine punishment, not only for stealing but almost killing his sister. Hearing this, Yuki leaped between the buildings to deliver the punishment the boy mentioned, and Riko urged them to follow the woman as soon as possible to include the maid's punishment of the crook in her diary. With that decided, they chased after Yuki and saw her throw her knives at the motorcycle's wheel, causing the thief to fall immediately and be at the mercy of the maid. Just as she was about to pursue the man with more knives in hand, Hitoriyoshi called out to her, but she didn't respond. He desperately pleaded with the maid not to kill the man, yet Yuki simply tapped lightly on the visor of his helmet and stated that was her divine punishment. Having done that, she confessed to Mr. Hitoriyoshi that she was hungry, so they returned to the festival to buy more senbei. Later, on the way back home, Riko celebrated that her research project was the best ever written. Yuki asked if everyone had to do such projects, leading the girl to deduce that the maid had never been to school by asking such a question. In turn, Yuki not only had never been to school but didn't even know what it meant. Then the child explained that it was a wonderful place where you study, meet friends, and participate in clubs. At that moment, Riko received a message from her mother announcing that there would be stew for dinner, and she ran ahead to hurry back to her mother's house later. Meanwhile, Yuki commented to Hitoriyoshi that it had been a lot of fun being with her and that many things she did today seemed to be normal people stuff, as the boy had said. If that was the case, Yuki would also like to go to school. Since she brought it up, Hitoriyoshi wondered how old she was while remarking that she really should go if she wanted to. Days later, when he realized it, Hitoriyoshi noticed that August had ended, marking the start of a new semester. At school, he worried about Yuki being alone at home. Then a friend of his shared a rumor about a beautiful maid seen in the city. This made Hitoriyoshi spit out the milk he was drinking, imagining that these outings with Yuki might sooner or later make the woman a topic of public conversation. Regardless, he pretended not to know what the guy was talking about. Another friend mentioned seeing her in the library, leaving Hitoriyoshi puzzled with this information, but at least happy that no one knew Yuki was his maid. That said, the teacher arrived in the classroom and introduced the new transfer student, Yuki Yokoya. Right away, Hitoriyoshi accidentally sneezes milk onto his own face as the teacher explained that the new student is Yokoya's cousin and will be sitting right in front of him. As she sits down, Yuki confesses that she's excited to study next to her friend and boss. Naturally, the entire class stares at the situation, trying to figure out what's going on. After class, Riko approaches with burning curiosity, asking her brother how school went, but the boy doesn't seem too happy. Quite the opposite, in fact. With the young girl's sudden appearance, he realizes it was all her scheme. The accused doesn't hide her guilt and celebrates the success of her surprise plan. Overjoyed, she remarks that Yuki learns super fast, to the point that there was nothing left to teach her after just 3 days. Towards the end, Yuki was already doing the little one's homework and more. About this, the maid admits she was thrilled with the girl's praise and decided to join the plan to go to school. Hideyoshi questions how she transferred to his school and even enrolled with his last name, Yokoya. Moreover, he wants to know how she got into the same grade and why she never mentioned any of this before. After a barrage of questions, Yuki sighs and explains that she managed the transfer by pulling some strings with her underworld contacts. The lie about them being cousins was Riko's idea because it would make her acceptance easier. As for being in the same grade, she explains that she's probably older than Hideyoshi, but thought being in the same class would allow her to serve him better somehow by being closer. As for why she didn't tell her boss, his sister said it would be much more fun that way, and that she just went along with the little girl's plan. Right then, Hideyoshi slaps his younger sister on the head as a form of revenge, leaving Yuki worried she might have done something wrong to provoke such a violent reaction. However, Hideyoshi says he's not angry, just a bit surprised. Once he finishes speaking, he breathes easier and relaxes, this time asserting that he'll enjoy a normal school life with his maid, which pleases the girl and calms the atmosphere. Days later at Ojiso School, Hideyoshi's entire class rushes out of the room after waiting a long time for the Katsuta bread. Speaking of bread still inside, Hideyoshi asks what Yuki would like for lunch. He was thinking about going to the convenience store to buy something, but the girl is curious about this Katsuta bread and can't stop thinking about it. Hideyoshi explains that it's so rare to get that you have to run as soon as the bell rings to snag at least one. Yuki doesn't seem to care about the difficulty. She's fascinated by this food and seems willing to take the risk. Hideyoshi continues to argue that the Katsuta to go closes early, so it will be tough to get there in time after school, which is why their school serves a selection of Katsuta breads every Wednesday. The most popular is the yakisoba bread with plenty of Katsuta sauce in the filling. That's what everyone calls Katsuta bread and what causes all the fuss that the girl can see. The problem is that their classroom is the farthest from the school store, so if they leave now, they'll never make it in time. Listening intently to this dilemma, Yuki responds that her mentor once taught her something. You should always take down your prey, even if it takes you down too. With that, she assures her boss not to worry, as she will get the Katsuta bread without fail. Right then, she jumps to the school's roof. Hideyoshi runs up there to tell her it's better not to draw too much attention, otherwise it will cause him a huge problem, but the ex-assassin completely ignores those words and continues on her way. Since that's the case, the young man realizes he can't do anything to hold her back, especially since her demeanor is that of a young girl enchanted in a candy store. For a girl with that level of desire, no distance, price, queue, or effort matters. She will chase after that bread to the ends of the earth. Indeed, they say a girl's true potential shows in moments like these. In other words, Yuki's concept of normal has veered off on an unexpected path, as if she were in some sort of trance. Speaking of which, the boy looks toward the school entrance and sees the first wave of the Katsuta Brigade. Riko appears unbidden to explain that this brigade is made up of those who have crossed any distance in search of the Katsuta to go's food, soldiers who risk their lives for the bread and train their speed every day to achieve this goal successfully. Moreover, their love for Katsuta is so deep that they perform a mysterious dance while savoring the succulence of the bread. Watching the race intently, Hideyoshi assesses that this way, Yuki will face the Katsuta Brigade right in front of the little shop, which will undoubtedly be a big problem. However, instead of what the boy said happening, Yuki actually confronts the guys, but instead of attacking them, she makes a majestic jump over the building to cut through and gets to the front of everyone in the shop. Once inside, the girl's eyes gleam intensely as she orders a Katsuta bread and a sandwich. A few minutes later, she returns to her boss with an insatiable taste of wanting more, because the shop owner said each Katsuta bread is limited to one person. With that, Hideyoshi picks up the croquette bread and assures that he's quite satisfied with just that. Yuki insists that her friend eat the Katsuta bread, but he insists that she should have the opportunity to eat, especially since he had it before, and she was the one who got the food. Reflecting on this, Hideyoshi thinks about scolding the maid for her crazy behavior, but after seeing the happy face she made, he decides not to be so harsh. Meanwhile, Yuki splits a piece of her bread and offers it to her friend. For a moment, the boy threatens to refuse, but faced with the maid's insistence, he accepts and takes a piece. Sheepishly, he admits it's quite tasty. At Maid at home, Riko squishes Mokita's face to let the little dog know she'll be sleeping with him tonight. Hideyoshi asks if his sister hasn't already visited him enough during the summer vacation, but the girl rumbles back, saying that while he can spend every day with Yuki, she, who has always wanted an older sister, doesn't get the same chance. After all, the two of them could talk about fashion, love, or sneak a midnight snack. In fact, Riko wanted a sister so badly that for a while, she tried to convince herself that Hitoyoshi was her sister. With that in mind, the petite girl believes that if Hitoyoshi and Yuki were to marry, it would be perfect, especially since, in her opinion, Yuki loves her brother. Hitoyoshi insists that the maid doesn't think about such things, yet the little one assures him that she understands the hearts of women better than he does. Speaking of which, he remembers that the maid gave him a bun yesterday, completely innocently, with no romantic intention involved. Either way, Riko stands her ground, proclaiming the truth, and since it came up, she thinks their mother would take the marriage well, although she believes their father would not take it well at all. Just then, Yuki arrives and asks who's getting married. Riko tells her they were talking about the maid becoming her real sister. Not only that, she bluntly asks Yuki if she likes Hitoyoshi, to which she replies that she admires him a lot. The guy nearly faints at this unexpected declaration while the youngest asks the maid to peel a persimmon for her. Afterward, the three of them gather in the backyard, and the little one comments that Yuki never wears makeup, but that every girl's dream is to be as beautiful as her without it. Yuki admits that her appearance has been advantageous in the past, though Riko doesn't think she's as pretty as her friend. At that moment, Yuki says she likes the little girl's face, finding her adorable and understanding. At this, Riko feels happy and embarrassed, as aside from her mother and father, nobody says such things to her. With that in mind, she asks if she will ever be as beautiful as Yuki, and the maid responds that ever since she discovered tonkatsu sauce, it seems her skin has become softer, so she advises the girl to try it. Without delay, Riko tastes the persimmon with the sauce and finds it much tastier. Watching the scene, Hitoyoshi considers that the two already seem like sisters at this point, and he's sure it's thanks to his sister that Yuki has adapted so well. Riko interrupts her brother's thoughts to tease him, asking if he wouldn't like to have a fiancé like Yuki, even hypothetically. Embarrassed, Hitoyoshi admits that he would, then his sister declares the two are engaged from now on. While this conversation takes place, a mysterious cat lurks in one of the bushes in the yard. The next day at school, Hitoyoshi reflects that his sister clung to him and Yuki all weekend, and that's why he couldn't sleep. Because of this, he falls asleep in the middle of class, so the teacher throws chalk at the poor guy, but Yuki slices the chalk in half to prevent it from hitting him. However, despite the effort, the chalk splits into two and hits the boy's eyes. Because of this, he's sent straight to the infirmary, and on the way, he complains that Yuki must not feel comfortable without at least a knife up her sleeve. Upon entering the infirmary, he finds that the former nurse Maruyama is no longer working. Instead, Nida informs him that she will be replacing her colleague starting today at the school. Hitoyoshi finds this woman too mysterious for such a profession, while Nida asks if that beautiful girl is a friend or girlfriend of his. Knowing it was Yuki, he replies that she is his cousin. Nida laughs and comments that the two don't look alike at all, adding that someone like Hitoyoshi is more her type. Faced with this strange flirtation, the young man thanks her, somewhat confused by what's happening, until the woman gets up, assures him there's nothing wrong with his eyes, and then locks the infirmary door. Having done this, she throws Hitoyoshi onto the stretcher and kisses his tie. Startled, the boy comments that even adult manga has more foreplay than this, yet Nida tells him not to worry and mentions Hitoyoshi's name, prompting him to ask how she knows his name. Without answering, Nina assures him that she will give him the best first time in the world, until Yuki bursts through the infirmary door. Without a second thought, Hitoyoshi runs to hide behind the maid, while Nina pretends that nothing was happening, claiming it was all a joke. Finally, she offers eye drops for the boy to use, but Yuki pulls her boss away and tells the nurse not to come any closer to him. Faced with this protective attitude, Hitoyoshi remembers what his sister said and starts to think that Yuki might be jealous of the other woman. In the end, Yuki takes the boy out of there and closes the door, leaving Nida inside talking to herself. Outside, Yuki apologizes for pulling Hitoyoshi away in such a rough manner. After that, she turns around and announces that she has something to tell the boy, and his heart starts beating 3 times as fast. But the maid doesn't say what he thought she might. In fact, she reveals that the nurse works in the same field as her, meaning she is an assassin. Returning to the infirmary, a cat appears to Nida and receives petting from her. Afterward, she comments that Yuki is not their own business, as one might think, and while collecting images obtained by the cat, she guarantees that she will end this pretend family of the girl. In fact, this woman's name is Grace, and she harbors a grand dream: to surround herself with handsome men and spend the rest of her life living comfortably on the island of Santorini. To achieve this, she has gathered a wealth of valuable information and used it in the best way possible, executing the right people to advance her project. Now her dream of many years is nearly within reach, and the key to it all is Yuki. If she can secure Xu's head, her dream life will be realized. Meanwhile, at 12:31 a.m., Yuki is keeping a slightly excessive watch over Hitoyoshi, so much so that the poor guy can't even sleep. The maid argues that they don't know when that woman might return, and the thought of taking her eyes off the boy and allowing him to risk being brutally attacked makes her feel sick. Hearing this, the boy realizes he's suddenly found himself in a massive mess. Regardless, the maid's goal is to gather as much information as possible about that woman to protect her master in the best way possible. Still, Hitoyoshi asks if there's a less obsessive way to watch over him since he can't get any sleep, prompting Yuki to demonstrate a great idea to reverse the situation in practice. In this case, she lies down next to the boy, but it seems this does not make him feel any more at ease, though he can't say no to her unusual method. By the way, he shares that he's more worried about the woman coming after Yuki, not him, but she assures him that if someone of that caliber attacked her while she slept, she could certainly handle the situation single-handedly. During the day, she only had a small knife in her uniform, but it was enough to intimidate the school nurse, which reassures Yuki for the time being. Honestly, she doesn't believe that woman would dare attack so directly, and this assertion leaves Hitoyoshi wondering if his maid is some kind of super strong assassin. Yuki doesn't know how that woman found her, but it seems that the maid's past is catching up with her and Hitoyoshi has been dragged into it. However, the girl asks the boy not to worry because this is the area in which she specializes, so she will protect Hitoyoshi at all costs. After all, he was the one who taught Yuki what human warmth is. About that, Hitoyoshi confesses that he worries a lot about his friend, especially because he doesn't want to lose her at all and feels he couldn't do much to help in this case. That said, Yuki promises to keep those words in mind. Finally, Hitoyoshi feels hot and wants to open the window, but the maid steps in front of him to do it for him, fearing there might be a sniper aiming at the room. Amidst this, she smells katsuta sauce coming from the front gate of the house, which briefly distracts her. At that moment, Grace takes advantage of the slit to capture Hitoyoshi and insult Sue, saying she really lost her knack for business since it's not like her to fall into such an easy trap. It seems Sue is so distracted by playing house that she's making some pretty silly mistakes, and Grace laughs, thinking that this girl was once called the White Wolf of the 9 Sons of the Dragon. That said, Yuki pulls out one of her knives, but Grace reminds her she could hit the boy's eye out before being reached. Yuki shows her true nature by adopting a terrifying expression and threatening her enemy with the worst things imaginable, saying Grace will suffer so much she'll beg for a mercy that will never come. Upon this, Grace realizes that the White Wolf hasn't completely lost her fangs and that the matter actually concerns her. In short, the woman needs the maid to die, but with her own strength, she knows she couldn't kill Shu even if she tried for 1,000 years, so she'll borrow the boy for a while to use as a bargaining chip and wants Sue to show up at the school today at 2 in the morning. Either way, she assures that the boy will be alive until then. After seeing her friend being taken away, Yuki recalls the words of her old master, who said she was born to kill people, and that the scent of death is always stuck to her. No matter how much the girl denies it, she will always be Sue. Thinking this, Yuki concludes that she put Hitoyoshi in this dangerous situation after meeting him, and that having a normal life was just a summer dream, it seems. Back then, her old liar said that Sui has the coldness of someone who doesn't see people as people, and that there is no other path for her in this life. Consumed by this philosophy that was imposed on her, Yuki takes on sinister contours and promises to kill that woman and eliminate any trace of what happened. Once she makes sure Hitoyoshi is safe, she will leave the country and everything will be resolved, and then she will live as Sui again. At the same time, she remembers Hitoyoshi saying he didn't want to lose her, along with other happy moments they had together with Rika, and these memories reawaken her desire for a normal life, causing a strong internal conflict within the girl. Meanwhile, Grace ties Hitoyoshi to the soccer field of Ujiso School and comments that it suits the young man to be hung up this way. It would be better if he were tied up with ropes, so she decides to try that next time. Putting that aside, she wants to know if the boy is scared because his life is in the palm of her hand. And it's such an insignificant life in her eyes that Grace would have no trouble ending it, and all this is the Gear Yuki's fault. Trying to put this in the boy's head, the assassin asks if he doesn't hate Yuki for putting him in this situation. Then, Hitoyoshi lowers his head and confesses that he's terrified, but Yuki said she would protect him, and all he can do is believe in that. Frustrated, Grace admits that the boy is braver than she thought, although he looks like a hamster. However, she should have expected this from someone who tamed Sue. In fact, it makes no difference to Grace whether Hitoyoshi dies or not because she just wants to end Sue with her own hands, and the innocent would just be collateral damage. Taking that cue, Hitoyoshi asks why Grace calls Yuki Sue, so she explains that Sue is a true monster. Even in a field where you meet all kinds of dangerous people, she managed to stand out as a ruthless assassin who spared no one, her sole purpose in life being to kill others. After all, Sue is the White Wolf, the 4th of the 9 dragon children. The 9 children are the world's most dangerous group of assassins responsible for the biggest events in humanity. However, because they are so powerful, they become high-profile targets, and there are several groups opposed to them. That's why, if she can get the head of one of them, Grace will land a huge reward, and her reputation will skyrocket. With that, she'll be able to land high-level, well-paying jobs, which will help her realize her dream. On this topic, Hitoyoshi replies that Yuki is just a quiet 16-year-old girl who loves tonkatsu sauce, and Grace admits she was impressed by this side of the girl to the point that she thought she was someone else in that moment when she spied on the 3 of them on the balcony. When Yuki talked about marriage, Grace felt like shooting everyone right there. Setting that aside, the woman reflects alone that this boy must have something special to have softened Su's heart this way, and that's big news, as people tend to become weaker when they need to protect someone they care deeply about. Sometime later, when the clock strikes 2 in the morning, Su doesn't hesitate to appear and go on the attack, with her enemy responding with pistol shots. Yet the maid dodges the bullets with her knives. Anticipating this, Grace starts shooting at landmines she had planted earlier, resulting in a huge explosion. Having done that, the Catwoman claims victory too soon and boasts about her brilliant strategy, but Su emerges from the smoke to confront her opponent once again. By a hair's breadth, Grace manages to block the blow and keep her head attached to her neck. Gaining distance, she uses provocation to destabilize her rival, arguing that she didn't tell the truth about her past because she knew Hitoyoshi wouldn't accept her if he knew everything. Still, Yuki doesn't care and points out that her boss has class early the next morning, so it would be nice if this could end right now. While saying these things, Yuki keeps the image of Hitoyoshi, Reika, and Mochida in mind, as well as the Katsuta sauce. Even though she notices a change in her adversary's personality, Grace wants to know if she's still cold enough not to mind seeing the boy lose an arm or two. So she activates the laser sights of the rifles she positioned against the boy's limbs to prevent Su from advancing recklessly. However, to the assassin's surprise, Yuki charges at her rival just the same. At that moment, Su remembers when her mentor said that the White Wolf lets no prey escape. Grace concludes that Su doesn't care about the boy after all, so she prepares to shoot him, but the maid throws a knife at each of the 4 rifle bullets fired at Hitoyoshi, deflecting them all and keeping the boy safe. At this point, Grace realizes she made a mistake using laser sights to make the scene more terrifying, but at the same time, she could never have imagined someone handling the situation this way. Finally, she pulls out her cell phone to use her other combat devices, but Yuki throws a knife against the device and destroys it once and for all. Then the 4th of the 9 dragon children approaches her prey and announces that she has lost. Grace still tries to draw her weapon against Hitoyoshi, but the White Wolf kicks the gun away and delivers a second blow to knock down her opponent. At that moment, Grace panics knowing she's going to die, so she thinks of a way to create a distraction and escape by any means. But unable to think of anything decent, she insults her opponent by saying she will never stop being Su, and although she might kill Grace, other assassins will come after her to build their reputations and claim the reward for her head. In other words, Yuki will spend the rest of her life having to kill other people, and that's definitely not living a normal life. The White Wolf might agree with that, as killing was the only thing she could do, but now she doesn't want to do it anymore or let anyone else die because of her. So she will decide to build a new personality where she can finally have a normal existence in the company of people who truly like her. Finally, the maid frees her friend from his bonds while Grace reflects that this girl, after all, is just an innocent and stubborn woman who doesn't rest until she gets what she wants. Thinking she was a step from death, Grace lets out a laugh of despair. After leaving the school, Hitoyoshi notes that the day was quite exciting, but he always knew Yuki would save him. Taking the cue, the woman apologizes for putting her friend in such a dangerous situation and blames it all on herself, so if Hitoyoshi wishes, she could disappear from his life forever. However, the boy takes his friend's hand and asks her to teach him some self-defense techniques someday, and he has a great desire to help his companion, even if just a little. Thus, the two walk off hand in hand. In the days that followed, everyone returned to enjoying normal school days, and Yuki began to show how her skills from her previous job were also quite useful in volleyball. As her teammates praised her overwhelming performance, the boys who gathered to watch every move of the beautiful girl started to believe she was good at everything she did. Similarly, Hitoyoshi knew that when Yuki took anything seriously, she was simply on another level compared to everyone else. The guys remarked that the girl was beautiful, intelligent, and athletic, so they had no idea how she could be related to Hitoyoshi. Modest and lacking self-esteem, Hitoyoshi couldn't deny that the comment made sense even though the two weren't actually related. In fact, the kid was still shaken after that bizarre experience he had undergone at the hands of Grace, an event that seemed more like a movie and had even put Yuki's life at risk. Meanwhile, Grace's words lingered in his mind about how Yuki was actually a ruthless assassin and the 4th of the 9 dragon children. Her real name is Su, the White Wolf. On the day of the confrontation with Grace, Sue had declared she would never kill again and would not let anyone else die because of her. No doubt this story caused great anxiety and doubt for Hitoriyoshi, but as long as Yuki continued striving as usual to lead a normal life, he felt he needed to stand by her side. Speaking of which, the girl shot a fierce glare back at the boy, quickly making him the target of envy from all the guys on the court. Suddenly, a volleyball was thrown and would have hit Hitoriyoshi directly, but a beautiful blonde prevented it with great dexterity. Full of flair and charm, she commented that it would be a big problem if the boy got hurt. At that moment, Hitoriyoshi realized that he wasn't just embarrassed because of his maid. Apparently, the existence of this blonde was also a major cause of his current predicament. Finally, after she sat down next to him, he bluntly asked Professor Nida what she wanted. Hurt, Nida remarked that he could be kinder to new and helpless teachers like her, while she moved closer to the boy. Instantly, he asked the woman to respect the distance between student and teacher, while reflecting that all this trouble began when suddenly Grace appeared at the school as if it were nothing. At first, Hitoriyoshi didn't recognize the woman, so she asked if he had already forgotten the incredibly hot night they spent together. Now she was no longer Grace, but the newly arrived Nida, a physical education teacher, a relative who was like an older sister to Hitoriyoshi and who had come to Tokyo. After all, Grace is a master of disguises and couldn't stop using her talent. Noticing that the boy was not too pleased with this turn of events, the teacher asked if he, by any chance, preferred women with black and long hair like Yuki, a question that left the poor boy speechless, prompting a laugh from the supposed teacher. Without moving a muscle until then, Yuki wanted to know if the assassin still wanted something from her, as it seemed she still hadn't learned her lesson. But Nida explained that she just loves funny things, for example, a legendary Sue working for some random kid and saying she'll never kill anyone again. Nida would never witness something as amusing as this if she fled to the Southern Islands. However, just like Sue, Grace also no longer wanted to lead anyone to the grave, much less go there herself. In other words, she raised the white flag and didn't want trouble with anyone anymore. Not that Sue and her friends should trust her for free, obviously, but it would be good for them to negotiate a ceasefire agreement. At that moment, Hitoriyoshi realized he was in the middle of a peace deal between two assassins. First of all, Grace promised she would no longer be hostile towards Sue and Hitoriyoshi. And secondly, she offered to provide them with school bread for 3 months. Hitoriyoshi thought this was some secret code between killers that went far beyond the bread itself, so Nida added that it wouldn't be just any food but Katsuta bread. With that, Yuki closed her eyes, lowered her head and said she was in, then shook hands with Grace to seal the deal. Hitoriyoshi wondered if it was really okay, but the maid assured him there was nothing to worry about, as in their world it was forbidden to indiscriminately execute ordinary people. Now that Grace knew she couldn't compete with Sue, she wouldn't interfere with Hitoriyoshi anymore. However, if something happened to the boy, the maid would undoubtedly protect him. As she said this, the girl drooled a bit, so the embarrassed boy asked her to wipe it off. Flustered, Grace listened as Sue emphasized that she could handle tens of thousands of people at the level of her former rival. Anyway, the new school teacher shared that she would continue to secretly observe the two, counting on them. Back to the present, Nina told the boy she never liked physical education, but thought it would be easier to lies around in that subject, or perhaps by becoming a nurse. Hitoriyoshi asked if Nida wasn't supposed to be secretly watching him, but the woman swore that's what she was doing. Setting that aside, she noted that Sue seemed bothered by the teacher's presence next to her master and waved directly at the girl, who was distracted on the court to the extent that her teammates asked her to serve the ball already. Hitoriyoshi argued that Yuki was afraid this woman might do something to him, but Nida stressed that it was far from it. Taking advantage of the boy's curiosity, she promised to tell him the real reason right in his ear. At that moment, Yuki served the ball with the force of a cannon and practically blasted through the wall. Hitoriyoshi and Nida feared for their lives, but the volleyball girls were impressed with their teammates' power and gathered around her to find out who this person really was, as surely that wasn't a move an ordinary human could make. In the following play, a young girl with pink hair worried that Yuki was playing with her shoelaces untied, but she quickly tied her shoes and reassured her teammate. During break time, while discussing what had happened on the court, Yuki explained to Hitoriyoshi that seeing him with someone from the underworld made her feel strangely uneasy for some reason. Right then, Hitoriyoshi realized what Nida was trying to say about Yuki's discomfort. It seemed she was jealous. To lighten the mood, he reassured her that it's normal, which delighted the girl. However, this conversation sent a sinister shiver through him, prompting her to rush to his aid. In the next scene, Yuki dons her complete uniform and descends the stairs of the house where she now works. Amid her chores, she notices that the towel she had put to wash is exceptionally fluffy and rushes to tell her employer, who is equally fascinated by the news. Reflecting on this, he realizes it has been a month since the maid took on the challenge of washing the towels. Initially, she mixed white towels with colored ones and confused the products, even using detergent instead of soap. Besides that, she had washed clothes with paper in the pockets and made various other mistakes, but now she's finally mastered laundry. For this reason, like the homeowner, Makita also expresses his joy at the maid's progress, who takes pride in the softness of the freshly washed towel. Later, Yuki suggests chopped cabbage with tonkatsu and katsura sauce for dinner, prompting Hitoyoshi to visit Mrs. Fuku to buy 2 tonkatsu. Since they are still frying, the young man has to wait, so the lady asks who the beautiful girl beside him is. While he explains, Yuki is enchanted to learn about the place where the katsura sauce comes from. Hitoyoshi remarks that he understands the girl's excitement, recalling how he once attended a hero show and learned that when you're in front of something you deeply love, it's impossible to contain your emotions. It's just normal. Hearing the word normal again, Yuki feels she is on the right path. When the tonkatsu are ready, she draws her friend's attention to the fact that the chef slicing the food is quite old. Yet, although his hands tremble before cutting, the shaking stops completely at the crucial moment and he handles his task with precision. Reflecting on this and considering the man's age, the ex-assassino wonders what kind of training he underwent. Perhaps he is the legendary assassin residing in Japan. Hearing this, Hitoyoshi can't hide his embarrassment in public, so he tries to defuse the situation by telling the lady that his maid is just a big fan of katsura sauce. The elderly woman feels very grateful for this and reveals that she is the one who makes the sauce, prompting Yuki to cover her mouth in awe, supposing this woman must be a deity. However, the lady clarifies that it was her husband who created it, and she just makes it. Regardless, Yuki is moved as she thanks the lady for creating a sauce so special to her life. After all, throughout her existence, she didn't know meals could be so enjoyable until she tasted this sauce and everything changed. She understands if the lady finds this a bit of an exaggeration, but it truly means a lot to her. When Yuki tries the sauce, she can barely express her feelings. It's as if warmth fills her chest. For that, she wholeheartedly thanks Mrs. Fuku Katsuda. In response to all this, the lady explains that the warmth the girl feels is due to happiness, and being happy allowed her to realize how tasty the sauce is. She's not sure if she's right, but that's what she believes. Yuki ponders these words and recognizes that must be exactly it. Suddenly, Mr. Katsuda surprises Yuki from behind and brushes some dust off her shoulder. Startled, the girl becomes even more moved, realizing this is no ordinary man. Changing the subject, Mrs. Fuku mentions that there's freshly made sauce available, offering Yuki a taste. Naturally, the girl is thrilled by the prospect and even more so when she tries the sauce. Later, they pray before the meal and eat together. After dinner, Hitoyoshi tries to understand how he can see Yuki as an ex-hit woman when she acts so simply and happily in his home. Researching the 9 dragon sons on the internet, he learns about a Chinese legend of a dragon that had 9 sons, each with a distinct shape and personality. Each lived in a place that suited his personality, but none could transform into a dragon like their father. With this information, Hitoyoshi would like to discuss it with his friend, but he also doesn't want to rekindle old traumas that may be dormant in her heart. It's best to wait for Yuki to tell him on her own. Falling asleep, the boy dreams about when his parents separated. At that time, he stayed with his father and his sister with their mother. Desperate, Hitoyoshi tried to reach out to his mother, who said they would see each other again one day, but then she departed into sheer darkness while holding another child's hand, probably his sister, Riko. Hitoyoshi woke up crying and screaming, so Yuki grabbed him to prevent any harm. Noticing he was researching the 9 dragon sons, she confesses she doesn't know much about them either, having been led to the group by her mentor. She saw some members but never even spoke to them. Back then, Yuki didn't quite understand what she was doing. She just didn't want to disappoint her mentor and be abandoned. That's why today she thinks she's dreaming of living such good things in this house, as now the world seems brighter to her. Looking at Hitoyoshi's face, Yuki remembers she's trying to be a normal person now. In turn, Hitoyoshi shares that he feels relieved when he sees his friend's face in the morning. Taking a moment for confessions, Yuki reveals that the reason she likes to offer her lap is that it reminds her of the night she felt she had been useful to Hitoyoshi for the first time. Therefore, the next time he has a nightmare, her lap will always be available. Regarding this, the young man admits it wasn't exactly a nightmare, as this time he dreamed that a heroine came to fetch him. From the following days, Yuki went about her daily routine with newfound ease and expertise, perfecting tasks that previously overwhelmed her. Suddenly, making clothes soft and fragrant became second nature to her, unlike before when she struggled to achieve such results. Naturally, Hitoyoshi was delighted with this new reality of having all of his bed and bath linens feel so wonderfully soft, and his daily expressions clearly conveyed his feelings. Equally happy, Makita thrived in this environment, indulging in food as usual. As evening approached, Yuki went shopping with a list in hand. As she read through her list, items like cabbage, potatoes, and onions, nearly every man's gaze was drawn to the beautiful woman crossing the street. Wherever she went, the maid always turned heads. Upon reaching the market, she picked out a carrot, and the stall owner assumed she was making curry for dinner. Thus, he helped her organize her purchases. At that moment, a young girl approached the maid shyly and with some difficulty, confessed that she found Yuki very beautiful and wished to be like her. She was curious about where the maid had bought her clothes, as they weren't something easily found, given that normal people didn't wear such attire. Hearing this last remark, Yuki felt the sting immediately, as the issue of being normal deeply affected her psyche, given that it was her greatest goal. Suddenly, Hitoyoshi emerged from a nearby store and coincidentally ran into his friend. Without delay, the woman expressed her concern about whether maid uniforms were normal. Due to this dilemma, Hitoyoshi decided to buy some clothes for his companion, but to his surprise, Riko was waiting for him at the subway exit, as if she knew he would be there. In fact, she had received a message from her brother seeking advice on what kind of clothes would suit Yuki, but instead of just giving her opinion, the little girl felt she should come along to find the ideal outfit. Hitoyoshi suspected his annoying sister would show up. He just didn't understand why Grace was pretending not to know anyone while sneaking behind a pillar. Embarrassed, the woman left her hiding spot and revealed that she had overheard the family discussing this through a bug and decided to come too. Yuki apologized for not having managed to remove all the bugs from the house, then Grace teased her by revealing that she had missed one in the living room. Finally, Hitoyoshi made it clear that he would love it if the two stopped this technological warfare behind his back. That said, Grace confessed that she didn't trust the boy to choose women's clothes on his own. Curious, Riko wanted to know if the beautiful and stylish woman was also an assassin, so the adult confessed that she was and hugged the little girl just to tease her. However, instead of panicking, Riko smelled the delightful scent of the woman and couldn't help but compliment her. In turn, Grace pinched the girl's cheek and remarked that she looked like her brother, all fun and cute. Losing patience, Hitoyoshi pushed Yuki away in an attempt to sidestep the two intruders, but his sister recommended a clothing store she really liked nearby. Thus, the quartet ended up going to the store together, and the first outfit Yuki tried on was similar to her usual attire, but in a striking red. However, she felt that this outfit restricted her movements in a way that was not practical, making Hitoyoshi realize that she was still not ready to stop making decisions based on her past. Meanwhile, unconcerned, Riko photographed the woman as if she were a professional model posing for a magazine cover. However, since Yuki did not like the outfit much, Grace took over the conversation and picked out a look for her colleague. Soon, Yuki emerged from the fitting room in a provocative police uniform. Instantly, Hitoyoshi highlighted that it would be a big problem if she walked out on the street like that, though she thought the bigger issue was not having a place to hide her knives in that attire. Hitoyoshi reminded her that she no longer needed to worry about carrying such things now that she had left her old job, but for Yuki, it was about feeling comfortable. She felt more at ease with her knives. In fact, she couldn't possibly carry that many weapons on the street, but Hitoyoshi let that slide for the moment. Due to the outfit Grace chose, the boy asked her and Riko not to interfere if they were not going to help, so the two laughed and decided to head to a regular store. There, Yuki tried on more outfits, this time everyday wear, although a bikini was among the clothes. Grace admitted she was getting annoyed with how everything looked good on this woman, while Riko's eyes sparkled intensely with Yuki's beauty. Grace asked Hitoyoshi what kind of dress he would like to see his friend in, and he revealed that a white dress or something similar would be nice. After leaving the store, the group finally chose the clothes Yuki would wear from now on, but Hitoyoshi felt that the girl hadn't chosen as much as she should have. She merely bought what she had tried on in the store. Not knowing how to handle this situation, she replied that it was hard to choose among the pieces. Just ahead was a Halloween store, so Riko hurried to pick out a costume for her brother for this year's event. Hitoyoshi hadn't realized they were participating again, but the girl replied that of course they were, as their mother always looked forward to it every year. Without wasting time, she tried on a vampire costume while Yuki tried a witch's outfit. Grace opted for something more visual, like a very short police costume. Cheerful, Yuki remarks that Riko is having a lot of fun, and her brother notes that she gets excited like this every year. Suddenly, the boy notices that the zombie franchise movies Bad Ink Dead are being shown at the cinema, and soon Grace arrives to make it clear she would love to watch them. Yuki seems a bit reluctant, but not because she dislikes the cinema as Hitoyoshi thought, but because every time she entered a theater, it wasn't to watch a movie but to take a victim to the bag. Therefore, she doesn't really know what the experience is like, especially since she hasn't seen many movies in her life. So the group heads to the cinema, giving the maid a chance to experience the sensation as a mere spectator. However, for some reason, the zombies in the movie frighten her deeply. While everyone else watched the film calmly, poor Yuki felt as though she was being devoured by those monsters. Upon exiting the theater, she was utterly terrified. Riko finds this curious since Yuki is the type of person who could easily annihilate those zombies. Then Yuki explains that she can't stand the stench of rotting bodies, and since they are already dead, it's scary to think that they wouldn't die even if she killed them. Hearing this, Hitoyoshi reflects that for Yuki, her past is what she considered normal in life. That is, she wants to be normal, but has no reference for it. Lastly, Grace finds it ridiculous that an assassin is scared of zombies and laughs, leaving the frightened Yuki downcast amidst the teasing. Later, Riko buys a sweet and offers a bite to Yuki. After hesitating for a moment, the maid tries the food and responds with a mouthful that it's wonderful. Similarly, Grace offers her sweet to Hitoyoshi, but he declines. Nearby, a girl named Naka Hikage watches the group with some resentment, as if she wanted to join in the fun. Her brother Tatsu grabs the girl by the arm and reminds her that she must never let her guard down. Besides, he announces that today she will train her legs. Naka bows and expresses honor in being trained by him, while he turns away without a word. Taking advantage of Tatsu's distance, the girl continues to watch Hitoriyoshi's group for a while before leaving. As they part, Grace says goodbye to her friends. Hitoriyoshi will take his little sister home, while Yuki will return home and prepare dinner. Left alone, the maid looks at her reflection in a store window, opens the bag with her maid's uniform, and feels saddened. On her way back, she reminisces about when she received that uniform and what it represents in her life. When she arrives home, she is joyfully greeted by Mochida, and she sets out to play with him. However, the bone he uses for it is very slobbery, and the cloth where he leaves it is dirty. Having been out all day, Yuki regrets not having washed the clothes, so she promises the little dog that she will wash his things. Meanwhile, on his way back, Hitoriyoshi feels the rain begin to fall and the thunder crack open the sky, wondering if Yuki is alright. Speaking of her, the girl is terrified by the loud sound of the thunder, mainly because she saw the zombie movie and starts to think that maybe those monsters are coming to get her. Amid this, Makida tears his towel, bumps into the table, and knocks over a pan. Yuki is startled by the noise and wonders what that was, but is too scared to investigate on her own. At the same time, her mind imagines all sorts of things. Suddenly, a mysterious creature appears in front of her, so she pulls out a knife to protect herself. When Hitoriyoshi arrives home, he notices that Yuki had shredded Makida's towel. Embarrassed, she promises to fix it, although the boy thinks it's unlikely due to the extent of the damage. But as the woman insists she will do her best, he decides to leave it in her hands. With that settled, Makida is happy and runs around the maid. By the way, Hitoriyoshi comments that she's wearing the maid's uniform and asks if she didn't like the clothes they bought today. She explains that she was very happy to have gone shopping with her friends, but this maid's uniform was a gift from her master when she started taking care of him. Now that the man is gone, this is the only thing that connects Yuki to him. At that time, he had said he wouldn't mind if she decided never to kill again. Yuki didn't understand what he meant back then, so she served him as an assassin. But now this maid's uniform has given her the chance to be there in Hitoriyoshi's house. For that reason, even though it may not be considered normal attire, Yuki has decided she wants to keep wearing it. Having said that, she wants to know from her friend if it's strange to think that way. Hitoriyoshi replies that he doesn't find it strange, but the girl highlights what Grace said about it being odd that she's afraid of zombies, even being an assassin. Either way, Hitoriyoshi doesn't find it strange at all, because it's okay if she wants to wear what she likes, just as it's okay to be afraid of things that scare her. More than that, it's normal to have things you like and dislike and to want to respect those feelings. Therefore, the boy concludes that his friend just needs to be normal in her own way. Moved by the conclusion of this conversation, Yuki sees Makida spinning around her with all this joy. Hitoriyoshi laughs, picks up the animal, and remembers that the towel in his mouth is the same one he had when he was left at their doorstep. Therefore, it's likely to have the scent of his parents. Because of this, Yuki offers to fix the towel before making dinner. After all, she understands the feelings of the puppy and wants to do something to help him. Yuki says this because the bell she uses is also the only thing that connects her to her lost younger sister. Hitoriyoshi is shocked to hear this, as Yuki had never mentioned having a sister.
To find out where her friend's sister is, Hitoriyoshi strikes a deal with Grace. If she helps with a clue, she gets a bowl of ramen. At the restaurant, with the meal in hand, she confesses she has no idea. The kid makes it clear he's joking when she says this after getting her food, so the woman replies that's the price just for asking her whether she knows something or not. To save face, she mentions that the only clues are Yuki's bell and the name Hua. Other than that, she thanks him for the lunch. Hitoriyoshi threatens to grumble, but Grace makes it clear he'll pay if he talks to her during her ramen. With that, she turns the bowl up and devours it with indescribable gusto. After finishing, she declares that authentic Japanese noodles are on another level, far better than sushi, accounting for 80% of the reason she's still in Japan. By the way, Grace wonders if Yuki shares this sentiment, but upon looking at the girl, she sees her dousing her ramen with katsuta sauce and becomes furious, viewing it as a heresy against the dish. Immediately, the blonde demands the maid apologize for the atrocity she's committing. Meanwhile, Yuki notices her sauce is almost out. To solve this, she heads with her friends to Mrs. Katsuta's shop, but the owner informs them she sold all her stock to a student who cleaned her out recently. Therefore, Yuki will have to return next week if she wants more. Hearing this tough news, the young girl's heart fills with pain and anguish, and she tries her best to comprehend the situation and praise the old lady's recipe as always. Leaving there, she vows to savor every drop of the sauce as if it were her last, all to make it last through this difficult week. Seeing his companion's drama, Hitoyoshi decides to change the subject to cheer her up. Starting a conversation about Yuki's sister, he wants to know what the maid would like to talk about with her when they meet. Honestly, Yuki has only vague memories of her childhood, so she doesn't remember exactly what her sister or parents were like. Before she knew it, she was simply alone in the world, and the only thing she remembers is her bell, a gift their mother gave to both daughters. Yuki thought that if she carried it, maybe her sister would find her, but that miracle hadn't happened in the last 10 years. Besides, the girl confesses she's scared of reuniting with her because maybe her sister has developed some resentment towards her. Hearing this, Hitoyoshi thinks he shouldn't have meddled by asking Grace, but Yuki doesn't see it that way. Even if she never meets her sister, just knowing she's well is a reason for joy. With that, Hitoyoshi reflects that although he tried to make his friend feel better, it was he who ended up cheered up by the whole conversation. Suddenly, two of Hitoyoshi's great friends bump into them on the street. Their names are Teiga and Kobachi, who were around because of the release of the album People of Nazca, and Teiga even won a signed edition at an event. Hitoyoshi asks if Nazca is the artist who will sing at the Katsuta festival, then the fan confirms. Changing the subject, Teiga wants to know if the couple is shopping, while Kobachi takes the opportunity to comment that this duo gets along too well. Jealous, he emphasizes that many of Hitoyoshi's relatives have been showing up lately, and it's a bit too much, as the guy is already sidelining his friends with this nonsense. Teiga asks his buddy to tone down the drama, especially since Hitoyoshi seems to be having a lot of fun since his cousin arrived in town. To integrate the girl into the group, the big guy comments that Hitoyoshi was terrible in high school. He went through a phase where he rebelled against his father and tried to be a cool guy. So much so that he wore a black trench coat in the middle of the intense summer and started calling himself the Nervous Knife. Yuki finds this cute, but the boy is desperate with the free exposure he's suffering from his partners. Unaware, Teiga continues his stories about the friend, noting that he didn't even clean the house. Then, Hitoyoshi decides to shut the guy up forcibly, but this ends up tossing the talker's signed CD into the air, falling toward a sewer. In an attempt to save the CD, Yuki throws her bag to cover the sewer, which works, but in this movement, the poor girl's katsuta sauce falls and spills entirely on the ground. That same night, the girl dreams of the sauce in front of her, which complains to the child version of Yuki about how it was treated by her. Because of this, it promises not to let her lick it anymore. At that moment, Hitoyoshi enters the room to announce that lunch is almost ready, then notices his friend is emotionally destroyed by the end of her beloved sauce to the point where she sees no more reasons to live. Embarrassed by the weight the girl is giving to this case, Hitoyoshi listens to her explain what happened in her dream, but that wasn't the only one she had. In the following days, Yuki had several nightmares about the katsuta sauce. Distressed by this, Yuki went to Hitoyoshi's room and asked him to sleep with her. In turn, the boy will have to stay up all night studying, but if she wants, she can stay in his room until she falls asleep. With this, Yuki makes sure to comment that Hitoyoshi is very kind and that the people around him like him a lot, as he is a boy of great character. Flattered by the sudden compliment, the boy scratches his neck and says it's not quite like that. Then, Yuki asks if he has ever hated anyone in his life. Caught off guard, he explains that he doesn't know if he has such a heavy feeling, but if he had to choose someone he feels something similar for, it would definitely be his father. Not that he hates the old man, but several things happened in the past that ended up driving them apart. That's something that happens when you're from a family. Hearing this story, Yuki becomes thoughtful, as her sister once said she hated her. With this in mind, she decides to leave Hitoyoshi alone and goes back to her room. Last night, Yuki dreamed again of the katsuta sauce, and this time, the giant jar really crossed the line by blaming everything that happened on the girl. According to it, not only did she drop him on the floor, but she also abandoned her own sister and only knows how to kill people. That's why everyone hates her. Yuki tries to explain that she just wants to be a normal girl, but the sauce interrupts her to continue its rant. Now, it claims that Yuki is nothing but trouble for Hitoyoshi and the others, and that, in truth, they didn't even want her in their home because everything that happened is her fault. In another part of the nightmare, the sauce recalls when Yuki was just a happy and extremely talented 6-year-old girl, so talented that her skills caught the attention of TV stations, which invited her to do live interviews on certain shows. On one such occasion, she explained that she learned to speak 15 languages to help her mother, who was an interpreter. In that interview, the young girl made it a point to express the deep love she felt for her mother, emphasizing how beautiful, intelligent, and wonderfully smiling she was. According to the Katsuta sauce, Yuki never cared about her talents or the attention she received. All that mattered to the child was the smile on her beloved parents' faces. On her birthday that year, we see that Yuki was called Maria. With the greatest joy in the world, she blew out the candles on her cake while her family sang happy birthday to her with excitement. Suddenly, the doorbell rings. As her parents went to answer, Maria tried to scream until the world around her began to melt, and her parents acted strangely, as if they weren't even there anymore. In this nightmare, seeing her sister lying on the floor, Maria cried and repeated that it was all her fault. After all, as the Katsuta sauce tells it, those men killed Maria's family to kidnap the prodigy girl. Therefore, the loss of her loved ones made the girl lose her emotions, and her obsession shifted from her parents' love to her sister. However, the sister couldn't accept Maria's way of life and said she hated her. Saying this, the girl threw her bell away. From then on, all that was left for Maria was her criminal routine, making her the most efficient assassin there is. Besides, what remained was the sick love of her mentor. At this moment, Yuki wakes up with Hitoyoshi, who was worried about the noise his friend was making and decided to check on her. Without a second thought, the woman hugs the boy and then throws him on the bed like a stuffed animal. Giving in to his friend's desire, the boy pats her back as if she were a baby. According to him, his mother once said that these pats make the baby think the sound is from the mother's heart beating, which calms them down. Thus, Yuki reflects that the sound of Hitoyoshi's heart is wonderful and falls asleep. The next day, Teiga and Kobachi tell Yuki about the Katsuta Festival, a tradition at a Jizo high school that includes the sports festival, the cultural festival, and the music festival. Each class participates and competes in the rankings of the 3 festivals, and the winner gets a special premium Katsuta sauce. Right away, Hitoyoshi looks at Yuki's face and realizes it was a bad idea for her to know this amid her withdrawal. Anyway, the two add that it's impossible to win the festival in the first year without knowing how it works. Therefore, the class of the student council president will surely take it. If they want to win, they'll have to shine at the cultural festival and keep good grades. On this topic, Yuki makes it clear that she hasn't failed any subjects, which makes Hitoyoshi happy since the average grades of the class are also added to the overall ranking of the Katsuta Festival. Their class average is 60, so if Yuki scores below 37, she won't be able to participate. As the girl's average is 42 at the moment, she trembles at the thought of missing out on competing for the special sauce. However, her friend calms her down by saying that all she has to do is try not to fail any subjects, and then everything will be alright in the end. So, she decides to give her best effort. During the break, the maid is amazed by the Katsuta bread that Grace managed to get for her, although it was quite difficult to find this bread this time. Tired of having to fetch this stuff, the blonde would love to be more appreciated for her deeds in this mess. At this, Yuki smiles and says she feels very grateful. But even Grace doesn't understand this behavior since she literally took her best friend hostage these days. Finally, since everything was resolved, the teacher asks the students to get out of there before they find out about their deal, then starts correcting some tests. Yuki asks Hitoyoshi what kind of result the class needs to win the festival, but the boy tries to convince her not to participate as it could expose her true identity. Speaking of which, Grace notices that the maid forgot to put her name on the test, which, according to the school's rules, immediately zeroes out the test. Panicked, Yuki knew she had felt grateful too early for this terrible woman, especially since she aced the exam. Hitoyoshi is more direct and asks if the teacher couldn't simply let Yuki write her name now. Then Grace makes it clear that she would never make such a deal without getting something in return. Obviously, aside from ending this Katsuta bread deal right now, she has a very important request to make. From today on, Yuki is never to bring Katsuta sauce to a ramen restaurant again. Having said that, even with sadness stamped in her eyes, Yuki knows that sacrifices are sometimes necessary. However, Hitoyoshi doesn't want to let his friend fall into the blackmail of this crazy woman. Either way, a sudden wind blows, and before she knew it, Grace saw Yuki's name on her test. Furious at the audacity of the student, the teacher lets it slide this time, but promises that next time it won't be cheap. With Grace's departure, Hitoyoshi thought it had been Yuki who did this, but in fact, it was Naka Hikage who acted secretly. She, who is in their class, decided to help because, according to her, she knows how to win the festival.
On a certain training day, young Hikage showcased her talent as she faced two swift opponents at once. Even swifter, she blocked each strike, applied control to the skirmish, and executed her moves with ease and technique. However, in a brief moment of distraction, she was outmaneuvered by a rival and almost hit. Before that could happen, Tatsu mysteriously diverted the trajectory of the staff and asked for the girl's name. Feeling intimidated, she struggled to regain her posture and responded to the man's question. Next, he inquired about her brother's name. Hesitantly, the girl revealed that her brother was named Tatsu Hikage. With this, Tatsu recalled that, as heirs to the 300-year-old Hikage style, the siblings must uphold a strong sense of discipline. Having made his point, Naka assured him that she understood, and the man turned and walked away. However, Naka was left with a bitter taste in her mouth, thinking she had disappointed her brother once again. Contrary to her belief, Tatsu's actual reason for intervening was to prevent his little sister's beautiful face from getting hurt during training. That same day marked the start of the Grand Triple Katsuta Festival at Ojiso College, where this year's interclass competition theme was cops and robbers. Within the student council, two organizers questioned the event's quality because this year only Tatsu would play the cop, while all other students would be robbers under special rules, posing a brutal disadvantage. However, Tatsu didn't see it that way, though he acknowledged that the real problem was someone named Yuki Yokoya. The assistants shared that this girl had recently transferred to the school as a cousin of Hitoyoshi Yokoya, but much of her background remained a mystery. Worried, Tatsu reflected that Yuki was in the same class as his sister. Given the mystery surrounding this person, she might be an enemy of the Hikages seeking revenge. In that case, he decided to personally investigate Yuki during his patrol and left the office. Meanwhile, the assistants discussed what Naka's class would do for the event. Her class was assigned the theme Mascot Cafe, where customers could choose any animal hat they wanted and eat to their heart's content. Participating in the project, Naka confessed to Hitoyoshi that her brother didn't seem to like her much. Hitoyoshi asked if she was talking about President Hikage, and she explained that yes, as he was very result-oriented and a typical perfectionist, while Naka was small and weak, not the powerhouse he expected her to be. With her self-esteem damaged by such high demands, she made it clear that winning would be difficult, but as long as she could prove herself useful in some way, that would be enough for her. Maybe then her brother might start to see her as somewhat worthy. She was about to reveal more, but as soon as Yuki looked at her, the girl became embarrassed and decided against speaking further. Hitoyoshi noticed Naka's difficulty speaking in front of Yuki, so he tried to boost her confidence by mentioning that, thanks to Naka, they had gathered important information about the competition. Feeling more at ease, she emphasized that in cops and robbers, athletic ability was crucial, and each class needed to choose 3 participants. Suddenly, Man Katsuta entered the room, surprising Yuki. Knowing exactly who it was, Hitoyoshi complained that Teiga would compete wearing that outfit, but the boy believed their golden trio, consisting of him, Yuki, and Naka, would crush the president. Speaking of which, Hitoyoshi couldn't remember seeing Naka in physical education, so she explained that she didn't like drawing too much attention. However, although she wasn't as fast as her brother, she assured him that she knew how to run and would give her all in the competition. Seeing the little girl losing her composure over this talk about her brother, Yuki assured her that it was because of her that they had seen a light at the end of the tunnel. Therefore, it was important for the group to join forces and give their best to do a good job. At that moment, Neka lost some of her nervousness and gained determination. With clenched fists, she swore to try her hardest because, if she gave up trying, she would never surpass her brother. Speaking of the devil, with ears pricked for every word spoken in this conversation, Tatsu showed all his fury upon seeing his classmates deceiving his dear innocent sister and making her use so many crude words, trying to instigate a rivalry between the two. For that reason, he blamed Yuki and vowed to get even. Later, Hitoyoshi asked if Teiga really planned to play cops and robbers dressed as Man Katsuta, and he confirmed it again without fear of being happy. Not only that, he recalled that the Katsuta festival was about the supremacy of Katsuta sauce, so his intention was to attract local TV attention and become the #1 mascot. With that, Hitoyoshi remembered that a TV channel would indeed be at the school, so he was concerned about Yuki's reaction to being filmed. He was about to bring up the topic with his friend, but Riko arrived early and complained that people were idle instead of working for the festival. Her brother explained that they had been taking care of breakfast. so they were off in the afternoon. Riko was irritated because she could no longer see her friends at the cafe, so Taiga asked her to be satisfied just with kobachi. However, having been picked up like a stuffed animal by the collar, the little guy was furious and wanted no more of that talk, so he furiously announced he would return to the store. Watching the interaction between the siblings, Naka commented to Yuki that they seemed to get along well, seeming upset that she didn't have that with her brother. Taking the opportunity to talk to the girl, Naka asked if Yuki would like to be her friend, albeit in a very awkward way. Nonetheless, Yuki accepted immediately, delighting her new friend. Then Hitoriyoshi called the two to take a walk at the festival, but Naka lost her nerve and made an excuse to flee from embarrassment. Taking advantage of the boy being nearby, Yuki inquired about what it meant to have a friend. Meanwhile, Naka rushed to the ground floor, worried that Yuki wouldn't want to be her friend anymore once she found out who she really was. She believed that winning the competition was the only way to prove her worth. To achieve this, she focused her hearing to eavesdrop on the committee's conversation about the event's organization in their room, and soon discovered something that could change everything. Later, it was time for the day's main event, a cops and robbers competition between the classes. The announcer introduced Nazca, a special guest who received a warm welcome from the audience. The rules were as follows. If a cop present in Hickage captures all the robbers and puts them in jail, the cops win. But if any robber manages to escape, the robbers win. A jailed robber can be freed if touched by another who is still free. Finally, Nazca announces a new rule. All participants must wear the same outfit from their class store while playing. At this point, Naka regrets not discovering this information earlier, as she could have prepared better. However, Yuki continues to support her friend, reassuring her that it's not her fault. After all, it was Hitoyoshi who had her wear a full-body costume, fearing someone like Grace might see the girl on TV and cause trouble. The game is about to start, and Tatsu can't take his eyes off his sister, enchanted by her cuteness and determined to do everything for her. However, the girl feels intimidated by Tatsu's attitude and turns her back to avoid eye contact. Moreover, she hides behind Yuki, prompting the man to virtually swear her to death. Finally, the robbers scatter across the field, but the Anom sisters instantly side with the president without a second thought, deciding to help him from inside the prison. One way or another, the game begins and Tatsu plows through the kids like a bulldozer, capturing every living soul in the court and confining them to jail. Soon, only 3 robbers remain: Taiga, Yuki, and Naka. Taiga, not wanting to look bad in front of Nazca, faces his rival head-on. However, Tatsu shows no mercy to the man Katsuda and throws him straight into jail without hesitation. Next, in the cop's mind, Yuki is the only one left to be captured, and she is precisely the one he most wants to lay his hands on. Yet Yuki proves to be a formidable opponent. With her exceptional agility, she constantly reacts to the man's advances in ways he can't counter. Amidst this, Naka thinks about running away as usual, but this time she decides to support her newest friend by releasing pink smoke that obstructs the attacker's vision. Reflecting on this, Yuki realizes that Naka truly is her friend, for as she had discussed with Hitoyoshi, a friend is someone you can always be with, doing silly things, but also the person who will stand by your side when no one else will. In the midst of this, after helping Yuki, Naka ends up in jail, leaving only Tatsu and the maid in contention on the court. She knows she will win if she can just evade capture for 2 more minutes, so she focuses on not slipping up. The problem is she needs to do this while wearing the costume and keeping her face hidden from the cameras, which is the hardest part. Or perhaps the hardest part is the fact that the man reeks of katsuda sauce, seemingly on purpose to keep the maid close. In this, the two clash again at the center of the court, with Tatsu thinking that Yuki is planning to break the bonds between the Hickage clan heirs, when in reality, all the girl can think about is lunch because of the sauce smell in the air. However, Tatsu plays dirty by saying that Yuki is approaching Naka as if they were friends, when the reality is that she doesn't even know the girl's suffering well enough to consider herself so important. According to Tatsu, a friend is someone very special. Hearing this last sentence, Yuki becomes thoughtful and uses all her technique to throw the opponent to the ground. Having done so, she runs straight to Naka and confesses that she responded to her earlier without understanding what friendship is, but now she knows. For she too has someone who is very special to her. And if she can be special to Naka, that's what she wants. Therefore, Yuki kneels and asks to be Naka's friend. However, before any response, Tatsu grabs Yuki inside the prison a second before the final whistle and ends up winning the game. In fact, Yuki had misunderstood the rule and thought she had already won. That is, she simply handed over the game. With the competition over, the news team invades the court to interview the game's biggest revelation, and Hitoyoshi is frantic with the chance of Yuki appearing on TV. As she is still dazed from the loss, the girl can't snap out of it, but Meika manages to mysteriously swap her costume with Taiga's somehow and keeps her new friend anonymous. After all this confusion, Yuki tells that at the moment she knelt before Naka, all she could think about was saving her, hoping that Naka would accept her as she is. For this reason, the maid hopes that the two can assume this responsibility as well as this friendship. Moved, Naka accepts without a second thought. At that moment, Tatsu approaches and calls his sister home as she must be exhausted. Approaching Yuki, he thinks how much of a witch she is for extending her influence over his innocent younger sister. So he makes it clear that next time he will not give leeway to those who corrupt the social order. Be that as it may, in the end things settle down, so Naka bids farewell to her friends with the certainty that she has indeed created at least one true friendship. At night, Yuki confesses that she didn't want the festival to end, especially because of the feeling of defeat that stayed with her. However, Hideyoshi points out that there will be another chance next year, so Yuki realizes she never thought about a future as far off as a year, as she always lived thinking she would die at any moment. But now it seems that her old life is nothing but a dream, and now her world has possibilities for a future. In the end, Hideyoshi confesses that he's hungry and invites his friend for a meal.